The balance factor. What is this concept and how does it relate to Satanism and lesser and greater magic? In answering this question and others from you, the listeners, we'll have to first address some misconceptions about satanic magic itself.
Well, it's not Satan worship, it's Satanism. It's embracing the life-enriching things which have traditionally been given the devil's name. Pride, lust, earthly success, rational self-interest, atheism, humor, nonconformity, science, a passion for living, being selective about whom we love. We don't see these as shameful sins, but empowering ideals. And we also recognize the psychological power and fun of symbolism and aesthetics, so we utilize Satan as mythology's most fitting mascot for what we're about.
Satansplain. Satanic Talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M.
Magister Bill M. here with Satansplain. I've got an email here from Rust. Rust wrote to me to say he searched past episodes of Satansplain and didn't see anything regarding the topic of the balance factor. He says, my understanding of the balance factor is realizing who and what you are in accordance with those goals you seek. In other words, if you are a homely man or woman that scares children merely by your grin, it would be outside the balance factor to believe that through lesser or greater magic, you would be able to win a beauty competition. It's having an honest understanding of your physical and mental attributes in relation to what is possible or obtainable. Am I correct in this understanding? It would be of interest to me at least to learn about its importance in lesser and greater magic. I'd assume it has more to do with lesser than greater, and other applicability it may have, whether a whole episode or just a listener question. I'd love to learn more. So I wrote back to Rust and said that, yes, this is a good topic suggestion for Satansplain, so all of you listeners right now can thank Rust for the suggestion. What is the balance factor? What do we Satanists mean by the balance factor? This is a phrase that shows up a couple of times in the Satanic Bible. It also appears in our 9 satanic sins list. When it comes to sin number 9, lack of aesthetics, we say that being mindful of this is the physical application of the balance factor, especially when it comes to lesser magic. Now, in my opinion, one of the best definitions and descriptions of the balance factor is what's found in the book We Are Satanists by Blanche Barton. The working definition given there for the balance factor is, quote, the weighing of what it is you want to obtain against the possibilities of getting it. We're going to read more from that book about the balance factor, and we're also going to read what the Satanic Bible says about the balance factor. The balance factor, however, relates to an even bigger concept we have in Satanism, and that is magic. I know that in the previous episode and in several other episodes of Satansplain, I talked about the concept of magic as we use it in Satanism. And if you've listened to those episodes, I'm sorry to say that you're going to hear me repeat some of the same stuff here, some of the same stuff you heard before, some of it. But please try to understand, so many people out there completely miss the boat on this concept, sometimes trying to describe it as something it isn't, or ignorantly dismissing the whole concept because they never take the time to learn what Satanism means by magic, maybe even making a straw man argument out of it in some lame attempt to discredit Satanism, or discredit the Church of Satan, or discredit Antoine LaVeyan. Some people, I swear, just lack the mental skills to grasp the concept of metaphors or hyperbole. So, because of all that, I'd just like to take a few minutes to Satansplain the concept of magic before we get to the balance factor. So, Satanism is, as I'm sure most of you already know, a non-theistic religion. We do not believe in deities, at least not in the literal supernatural sense. We believe all deities are fictional inventions of the human imagination. As I say in the introduction to every episode of Satansplain, the Satan in Satanism is a mascot for us, not a real deity, let alone a deity we worship. You could argue that what Satan represents for us is real. Our carnal nature is a real thing, for example. Greed is real, pride is real, lust is real. But again, Satan is a metaphor, at best a personification that we humans have attached onto things. So if you are a Satanist, then you understand the concept of metaphor and see how the metaphor of Satan is helpful as an empowering mascot for these things. I would then argue that magic is likewise a helpful metaphor, or at least you can think of it like that. In fact, non-Satanists even use the term magic as a metaphor to describe things that may be too amazing to put into words. Oh my, that concert we went to last night was magical. Oh, that year we went to Bob and Julie's wedding. It was such a moving ceremony and we were all in tears. It was truly magical. Okay, you've heard people use magic in that kind of context. Now, is this an expression of some sort of supernatural belief? No, of course not. You can be an atheist with a completely materialistic worldview and still use language like that. More importantly, you can have moving experiences without attributing them to gods or supernatural forces at work behind the scenes. We do, however, see occult religions doing spell casting and that sort of ritualistic stuff and calling it magic, spelled M-A-G-I-C-K. And the reason they do this, the reason they add the K to the end, is because they do believe that what they're doing is some special supernatural thing which should be distinguished from the more general use of the term magic, like I just used it a moment ago, or for that matter, different from stage magic, which, stage magic, things like sleight of hand, card tricks, pulling rabbits out of top hats, that kind of magic. But in Satanism, we don't spell magic with a K, because we don't see it as being a supernatural thing. So, how do we Satanists define magic? Well, inside the Satanic Bible, there is a chapter titled The Theory and Practice of Satanic Magic, subtitled Definition and Purpose. You've heard me read this before, and I'm going to read it again. The chapter begins, quote, "The definition of magic as used in this book is the change in situations or events in accordance with one's will, which would, using normally accepted methods, be unchangeable." End quote. Now, does that definition leave some things up to a degree of subjective interpretation? Sure. In fact, the very next sentence in that paragraph is, "This admittedly leaves a large area for personal interpretation." But once again, notice that in that definition of magic, there is no mention of special forces in the cosmos or the actions of angels or deities or divine goddess energy or whatever. The book goes on to explain that use of magic then breaks down into two subcategories, again, as far as we're concerned in Satanism. And those categories are greater magic and lesser magic. Greater magic is ritual or ceremonial. You set up an altar, you perform a formal ceremony. You make use of the psychological and esoteric power of psychodrama and theater and symbolism and ritualistic expression. This is most certainly one way to do things in accordance to your will, to help put you on the right path to getting what you want, and is a method which, as we say in the definition of magic, is normally not acceptable. This isn't a mundane thing you're doing. Now, the other category of magic, lesser magic, as described in the Satanic Bible, quote, "consists of the wile and guile obtained through various devices and contrived situations, which when utilized can create change in accordance with one's will." Now, Anton LaVey wrote additional books to expand on both of these concepts. For greater magic, there's the book The Satanic Rituals, which has a nice long introductory chapter on the topic. And for lesser magic, there's the book The Satanic Witch. And even if you are a male Satanist, there is much to be gained from that book. Now, there is so much more I could say about these topics. I have already filmed at least 2 episodes of Satansplain talking about just satanic ritual without even getting into the nitty-gritty of greater magic. But let's get straight to the actual subject we want to talk about, which is the balance factor. Before I read you what the Satanic Bible has to say about the balance factor, like I said, I want to read you this full excerpt from the book We Are Satanists, because Magistra Blanche Barton puts this quite well. There is a Q&A section in the book about satanic ritual and greater magic, and one of the questions is, how and what do you ask for? And here is the provided answer. One of the most important ingredients in any magical working is the balance factor. This simply means the weighing of what it is you want to obtain against the possibilities of getting it. For example, if you want a new car but have no money, no job, no benefactor, no intention of getting a job, and are unwilling to prostitute yourself, and pause right there to some people who may be out there. There are a couple of different meanings of the verb prostitute. There is the sexual meaning, but the verb can also mean just debasing yourself, to lower your standards to get something. Frankly, I take this second meaning in this context. But anyway, now that I've completely ruined that explanation, let me start again so we get the whole flow of this. Okay. One of the most important ingredients in any magical working is the balance factor. This simply means the weighing of what it is you want to obtain against the possibilities of getting it. For example, if you want a new car, but have no money, no job, no benefactor, no intention of getting a job, and are unwilling to prostitute yourself, then you better not kid yourself into thinking you are going to wave a magic wand and have the car materialize before your eyes. Or if you are a man of less than spectacular looks, with limited interests, and have never won prizes for being a scintillating conversationalist or entertaining others, but think if you say the right incantation, you'll snag the sexy little gal in your office who has her pick of all the eligible men she meets, you are sadly mistaken. But if you are honest with yourself and utilize everything at your disposal, in short, put yourself out a bit, you can use greater magic to supply that remaining push needed to turn a situation to your advantage. Never attempt greater magic, that is, ceremonial magic, until you have mastered lesser magic, and have used every physical means available to obtain your desired results. If you are the type of person who cannot or will not trouble yourself to get what you want, then you are the type who will not be capable of the determination and emotion necessary for greater magic. And that is the end of the book excerpt. So with that, we get a good working definition of the balance factor I said earlier, weighing what it is that you want to obtain against the possibilities of getting it. So also notice the way this other part was worded. You can use greater magic to supply that remaining push needed to turn a situation to your advantage. Key words there, remaining push needed. A satanic ritual is not some sort of recipe where anybody can just walk in, light some black candles, and perform the same exact series of steps, just going through the motions, and then you can just sit back and the thing you want will magically happen, like you see in the movies. We'll get back to this point later. Let's turn back to the Satanic Bible. As I said, there are a couple of cases where the term balance factor comes up. The first is actually in a completely different context from magic, but for the sake of completion, let's run through it. In one of the opening chapters of the book, Wanted God, Dead or Alive, Anton LaVey addresses the most basic question, typically first asked about religions, which is, who or what is God? So it's one of the questions that first comes up when you're talking about any religion. And I covered all of this in Satansplain episode number 16. But in short, he points out that this balancing factor of the universe, this action and reaction of things, the natural phenomena that people traditionally call acts of God, or maybe the hand of fate or whatever, well, it's just a set of impersonal forces and actions that happen, whether or not you give it a personified name. And of course, the book goes on to explain that the God of Satanism is the self, not some sort of external deity. Deities are actually the invention of humans, not the other way around. So if it's you versus the forces of nature, yeah, that's sort of a balance factor. But let's get to the parts of the Satanic Bible where LaVeyan talks about the balance factor with regards to magic. LaVeyan lists the several essential ingredients used in the performance of magic. The first, for example, is desire. You should be clear about what it is that you want. If you don't want anything specific and maybe just want to do a satanic ritual for the whole thrill of doing a satanic ritual, well, that's fine. As we say in the same book, humans need ceremony and ritual, fantasy and enchantment. But in that case, we're just talking about satanic ritual, not necessarily magic as we defined it earlier. So you do need desire on some level in order to direct your will. There's also things like imagery, direction, and finally this thing called the balance factor. What does the Satanic Bible say about it? Here we go. Quote, "A complete knowledge and awareness of this factor is an ability few witches and warlocks ever attain. This is simply knowing the proper type of individual and situation to work your magic for the easiest and best results. Knowing one's own limitations is a rather odd bit of introspection, it would seem, for a person who should be able to perform the impossible, but under many conditions it can make the difference between success and failure. If, in attempting to attain your goal through either greater or lesser magic, you find yourself failing consistently, think about these things. Have you been the victim of a misdirected, overblown ego which has caused you to want something or someone when the chances are virtually non-existent? Are you a talentless, tone-deaf individual who is attempting through magic to receive great acclaim for your unmusical voice? Are you a plain, glamourless witch with oversized feet, nose, and ego, combined with an advanced case of acne, who is casting love spells to catch a handsome young movie star? Are you a gross, lumpy, lewd-mouthed, snaggle-toothed loafer who is desirous of a luscious young stripper? If so, you'd better learn to use the balance factor, or else expect to fail consistently. To be able to adjust one's wants to one's capabilities is great talent, and too many people fail to realize that if they are unable to attain the maximum, quote, a half a loaf can be better than none. The chronic loser is always the man who, having nothing, if unable to make $1 million, will reject any chance to make $50,000 with a disgruntled sneer. One of the magician's greatest weapons is knowing himself, his talents, abilities, physical attractions and detractions, etc., and when, where, and with whom to utilize them. So that's the end of that excerpt, end of that quote from the Satanic Bible. Like we saw earlier in that explanation from the book We Are Satanists, it's about that extra push. So an analogy that I often use when talking about satanic ritual, and some of you have heard me use this before, well, I'm using it again, is to think of a ribbon cutting ceremony. Now, I'm sure some of you know what I'm talking about. So, somebody creates a new store that's about to open, or a new library or a building or something like that. And it's a big event for some people. And because of that, humans then do what humans naturally do to commemorate events. They perform some sort of ceremony. Humans are very symbol and ritualistic, minded, very ritual-centric, symbol-centric. And humans get together props and decorations and special words, and they perform a ritual, whether it's a graduation or a birthday or whatever. But in this case of the ribbon-cutting ceremony, they tape a ribbon across the doorway of the new place and say, "Welcome, everybody. Here's the new business. Here's a speech, blah, blah, blah. And now the new owner will cut this ribbon that we've taped across the doorway, and the store will be officially open." Now, what is the connection between the act of cutting a long piece of shiny fabric and the financial success of the business? Well, a mystic might say, "Well, when you use a green ribbon for this, you summon the magical powers of the gods of prosperity, who will see that what you're doing is an enactment of the supernatural blessings." And to that I say, no, that's bullshit. Likewise, on the other end, Some fedora-wearing, neck-bearded atheist from Reddit might say, well, of course there is no connection between the cutting of the ribbon and the financial success of the business. I bet we could conduct a scientific experiment using a control group of businesses who don't do the ribbon-cutting ceremony versus the ones who do, and we'd find no statistical correlation. And to that I say, yeah, fuck you. You're equally stupid and even more pathetic if you think that everything in life has to have some rational, practical meaning, and that things like aesthetics or celebrations or symbols mean nothing. It's true that there's no reason to think there is some special supernatural power inherent in the act of ribbon cutting, somehow, leading that business to success. But that doesn't mean the whole ceremony is useless. In fact, maybe it can help the business in some practical ways. Having an event like that is good for publicity. It can give customers a good first impression, which makes them want to shop in the store. It can improve the morale of the employees there. It feels like they're part of something important. Having employees in a good mood can put customers in a good mood too. So let's get to the topic of the balance factor. In this whole side analogy I made with the ribbon cutting ceremony, how might the balance factor relate to this? Well, let's say you start a business, but it's wildly unrealistic. You want to be the owner of your own business and you want to do well, but let's say your store sells snowmobiles and your store is located in southern Florida. And you also want to be a store that's open 24 hours a day. So you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on the nicest ribbon cutting ceremony, great speech, you have hors d'oeuvres, you have music playing, ice sculptures, it's a fun event. But my guess is that no matter how much money you put into that ceremony, or how focused you are in your desire to make it a success, you're really just being unrealistic. Your business is going to fail. People in Florida do not buy snowmobiles because it doesn't snow there. And nobody is going to wake up at 2 a.m. thinking, oh, gee, I got to go hit the 24-hour snowmobile store because I got to get a new piece for my snowmobile. Now, even in terms of lesser magic, let's say you're a really, really persuasive salesperson. Can you talk somebody into buying a snowmobile from you in Florida? Well, even if you're the most amazing salesperson ever, I doubt you would sell many to justify keeping the business in business. In fact, if you were that persuasive of a lesser magic user that you could even make one person in Florida give you money for a snowmobile, then what are you doing in that business? If you're that persuasive, you should be applying your skills to something more realistic. Open a car dealership in Florida. Or stay with snowmobiles, but, open a shop in the Rockies or in Canada or someplace with actual snow. Imagine how much more successful you'd be. Now, as we said in the Satanic Bible, it seems like a bit of a contradiction to, on the one hand, say, beware of your own limitations, after, on the other hand, saying, go into this ritual chamber and focus your will and attain the otherwise unobtainable. Namely, unobtainable if you just keep on going about your normal routines in life. Still, hopefully, you get the concept of the balance factor here. And maybe I've even cleared up some confusion about the concept of magic in Satanism. Some of you may have. Let's take a break now. You are listening to Satansplain.
You are listening to Satansplain, real satanic talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M. For questions, comments, and correspondence, send an email to bill@satansplain.com.
Do satanic cults lurk in the shadows? Can memories of satanic ritual abuse be repressed? Do exorcisms really drive out demons? And are those demons always possessing Zach Baggins? I'm JD Sword, the Satanic Skeptic. Join me on The Devil in the Details as I examine these questions and more, bringing a skeptical and satanic perspective to the paranormal. The Devil in the Details, available on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, and more.
handmade, all-natural botanical perfumes, soaps, and ceremonial incense, sculptures and jewelry to adorn yourself and your other altars. All this and more await you at moonandsunemporium.com. Ritual perfumes and other occult fine art luxuries, created and curated by me, Priestess Sarah Josephine Clark, with tarot readings by Reverend Dr. Dylan Clark. moonandsunemporium.com.
Magister Bill M. here with Satansplain. You can listen to episodes of Satansplain on a variety of platforms, not just YouTube, but also Spotify, Audible, Google Podcasts, and most other places where podcasts are available. You can also listen to episodes right on the main website, satansplain.com. If you're on YouTube, X, or Facebook, please give a like and a follow to Satansplain on there. For all other questions and correspondence, email me directly. bill@satansplain.com is the email address. And if you enjoy Satansplain and would like to show your support, consider becoming a member or a subscriber on Locals. Go to satansplain.locals.com. You can join there and read updates without being a paid subscriber. Membership on locals.com is free, but being a subscriber to Satansplain helps me offset the costs of the show. For as little as $5 a month, you can be a subscriber, and that's at satansplain.locals.com. We also have a merchandise store. Get yourself a Satansplain t-shirt or coffee mug or sticker. That's at store.satansplain.com. And to those who have already subscribed, I once again thank you. I'm going to read you 2 pieces of listener mail. Sorry, no Satanic dote in this episode. Maybe next time. But I've got 2 emails here that are somewhat related. I'm going to read you what was written to me in my response. TN says, my girlfriend, who is a Wiccan, told me that Satanism was one of the first 5 religions, and we should be called neo-Satanists instead of Satanists, as we are not the original. She also said that we are the exact same as old Satanists that worshipped Satan. The only difference is we don't believe he actually exists. Well, that's quite a big difference. I just wanted your take on this because I could not find anywhere online that states this information, and I don't want to cause an argument due to lack of information. But I believe what she's saying is incorrect. So I wrote back to TN. I said, yeah, there are quite a few flaws in her arguments here. First of all, I'm not sure what she's claiming the first 5 religions to be. It sounds as hopeless as trying to find the first 5 rock songs. Because, the further back in rock history you go, the more vague the line becomes between rock and roll and blues, for example. Likewise, the further back you go in anthropology, the less clear the definition of religion becomes. You can find humans using ritualistic expression, for example, cave paintings, burying the dead, and so on. But it's hard to extract a whole formalized belief system from just a handful of artifacts. At best, you may be able to put these practices under a really big umbrella term like animism or paganism, maybe. But, again, those are still vague umbrella terms. So, what the first 5 religions are, kind of a weird endeavor. As for her claim that we are not the original Satanists, well, she would have to provide proof to back up this claim. I'm guessing that, like many people who attempt and routinely fail at discrediting us, she's stretching the definition of Satanism to include anything from devil worship to some pre-Christian pagan practices with sinister-looking themes. The bottom line is that there is no evidence of an actual religion calling itself Satanism, and its practitioners calling themselves Satanists, until the Church of Satan in 1966. There have certainly been devil worshippers for centuries, but again, these weren't people calling themselves Satanists, and in fact, not necessarily following any clearly defined religion. At most, you had people doing some sort of theatrical blasphemy as opposed to some actual codified religion with an ethics code and so on. Even then, it's hard to say which of these old devil-worshipping stories you read are just Christian scare propaganda, or maybe even people just styling themselves after that propaganda. And again, you also find some old pagan practices that may have involved serpent worship, for example, but that does not make it Satanism. So I don't see any validity to the argument that we should be calling ourselves neo-Satanists when we were the first group to formally establish something calling itself Satanism. Again, I see no justified reason to retroactively label these older, unrelated religious practices from ancient times some form of Satanism, as if we're denominations of the same religion, because we clearly aren't. The funny thing about Wicca itself is that its practitioners similarly often claim Wicca is an ancient religion, but it isn't. It was formed in the 1950s by Gerald Gardner, in part to dig up and incorporate ancient pagan archetypes and other ideas in a new sort of way. Now, witchcraft, on the other hand, that's a more broad idea of using ceremonies for cause and effect. Self-proclaimed witches have been around for a while, sure. But Wiccans do not have the monopoly on the term witch. There is no evidence of anybody before Gardner who called themselves Wiccans, and as for the ones who may have called themselves witches, well, they didn't worship the god and goddess or believed in the Wiccan Rede and the threefold law and, the whole shebang from Llewellyn paperbacks. Now, some Wiccans try getting, crafty, if you'll pardon the pun. Some Wiccans try getting crafty here and say that the term in Old English for witch was Wiccae or something similar, Wicce or whatever. But that just translates again to witch or witchcraft, not a specific religion. All right, next email. I've got an email here from Citizen Crier. He has somewhat similar questions. Crier writes, Dear Magister M, I enjoy all the programs that you host, like The Devil's Mischief and The Metro. I only guest hosted The Metro, by the way. Of course, Satansplain is always interesting, and I, for one, appreciate all the hard work you devote to helping others understand Satanism. Hail, Magister M. Well, thank you, Crier. Continuing with the email. Crier says, I've been recently arguing that Anton Szandor LaVey did not invent LaVeyan Satanism, and my daughter assured me that no one other than the Church of Satan cares at all about the semantics of the Church of Satan. I'm annoyed by the term LaVeyan, but I guess I must look as though I have a stick up my ass when I start telling people my feelings. Is LaVeyan a necessary and logical evolutionary term? Though LaVey founded the Church of Satan and described Satanism as the Satanic Bible, he did not include himself within the Satanism. I completely understand why LaVey chose the name of this religion as Satanism, because any other name would be incorrect. And Crier goes on here to reiterate some of the same points I've talked about before, why LaVey chose the name Satanism, why it's apt, how he searched around for these supposed groups or a book or identity that really laid it down and couldn't find one, and so he took it upon himself to do these things. So I wrote back. I said to Crier, as you aptly point out, the term LaVeyan Satanism is a redundancy. Anton LaVey was the first to codify an actual religion calling itself Satanism. A person who adheres to the religion described in the Satanic Bible is simply a Satanist, not a LaVeyan Satanist or a LaVeyan or other such misnomers, just Satanist. There is no evidence of an actual religion calling itself Satanism before Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan. Thus, there is no rational reason to take the same label and throw it on some unrelated belief system, whether it came before or after. However, as you also point out, lots of people who aren't Satanists still want to take on the label because they think it sounds cool. As we say right at the start of the Satanic Bunko sheet, because Anton LaVey has made Satanism so popular, everyone wants to jump on the bandwagon. And here in my email back, I gave him a link to that article, which you can find on churchofsatan.com, the Satanic Bunko sheet article. Continuing with my response, some of these people will claim that Satanism did in fact exist before LaVeyan and try to justify this. They'll point to some example of the word Satanism or Satanist, always with the lowercase s it seems, being used before 1966. It's true that the word Satanism existed before 1966, but again, there was no actual religion calling itself Satanism. And I go on to explain the word Satanism was used purely as a pejorative, and by that I mean a slur term. So it's kind of like the term conspiracy theorist or fascist or libtard. Nobody uses these terms to refer to themselves. They're all words other people use to label and denounce somebody else. And that was the case with the word Satanist and Satanism. It wasn't a formalized religion. It was just used to refer to any sort of blasphemy or sinning. As for people who believe in and worship an actual Satan, yeah, there's a centuries-old term for that. It's devil worshiper. But even then, these cases of devil worship didn't seem to have anything structured enough to be considered a religion, at least none that I've seen. There were aristocrats who'd throw on a black mass as a good excuse for an orgy, but again, no clear religion. No real ethics code to follow in the day-to-day world, just theatrical blasphemy. On top of that, the source a lot of these practices seem to be wildly imaginative scare stories created by Christians, rumors of people who did them, and people who styled themselves after the rumors. As pointed out in the Satanic Bible, these people are really just, quote, the byproduct of later and more elaborate propaganda. So, in summary, as I've said on the show before, the term LaVeyan Satanist does not clear up any confusion. It only adds to it. You are not paying any sort of homage to Anton LaVey by saying LaVeyan Satanist. In fact, you're doing the opposite. The term is only used by people who want to justify using the word Satanism to refer to unrelated beliefs and practices. This is especially true of journalists and Christian evangelists who want to sustain the story that crazy people who hear voices in their head and commit crimes in the name of Satan are Satanists. But once again, there is no rational reason to call these people Satanists. The Church of Satan, devil worshippers, occultists such as Crowley Stelamites, Kevin Solling's political stunt group known as the Satanic Temple, or devil worshippers in the Temple of Set, etc., are not different denominations of the same religion. They are too fundamentally dissimilar to be such. But this is why people who whine and call us gatekeepers and try to say, oh, you're just like the Catholics claiming that Protestants aren't the real Christians, simply don't know what they're talking about. We know Catholics and Protestants are each denominations of the same religion, that religion being Christianity, and we know this because they share the same theological origins and same core beliefs that distinguish Christianity from the rest of the world's religions. They both have the Bible, more specifically a focus on the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus as described in the Gospels in that Bible. Somebody like Kevin Solling's group, on the other hand, throws the Satanic Bible entirely out the window and tries to hang the label of Satanist on an unrelated, vague set of 7 platitudes. That is not making a new denomination. That is just stealing a label. Additionally, I have seen some people over the years who do claim to be taking the works of Anton LaVey and forming a new denomination from them, but it's not clear why they're doing this other than narcissism and trying to boost their own sad ego. Somebody, for example, will be acting like an ass on a Church of Satan affiliated message board, get kicked off, and decide to go form the Reformed Church of Satan or the Church of Rational Satanism or some other such bullshit. And what they present is something either against Satanism on a fundamental level, like, for example, trying to include devil worship, or nothing that a member of the Church of Satan can't already believe or do, if he or she wishes. For example, I saw some idiot online claiming he had founded a new type of Satanism and called it eco-Satanism, where he focuses on environmental causes. Okay, well, why can't you just be a Satanist who happens to focus on environmental causes? All Satanists have some sort of passion in life, whatever it is. It doesn't warrant a new religious denomination. So whenever I see people using the term LaVeyan Satanism, I correct them. I say it's simply Satanism, and there is no rational reason to call all of these other unrelated groups, all different types of Satanism. We are not denominations of the same religion. If somebody still insists on having an umbrella term to refer to any group that sports an inverted pentagram, I guess I could use left-hand path religions. So that concludes my email response back to Citizen Crier, and I think that's going to do it for this episode of Satansplain. Thank you all for listening, and until next time, hail Satan.
You have been listening to Satansplain. For more information about the show, visit the official website at satansplain.com. And for more information on Satanism itself, visit churchofsatan.com. This episode is copyright 2024, Magister Bill M.